Welcome to Shattering the Ceiling. We're super excited to share part of our first conversation with you today. Last week, we got the chance to talk to Cindy Liu. Cindy graduated from Columbia University in 2018 and for her senior thesis researched women in classical music.
Her paper is entitled The Quadruple Bind: Occupational Barriers to Women in the Classical Music Industry. In our conversation with Cindy, we discuss her findings and the intersectionality of her research. We also discuss classical music as a business and how it can become what it is meant to be, art for everyone.
I think really we'd love to start with just like you introducing yourself and talking about your thesis and like how you decided to spend all of this time and effort into this project.
Firstly, thank you so much for having this conversation together and making this space. I guess introducing myself a little bit, I currently work in artist management in New York, and I feel very lucky that I'm able to work with such an incredibly open and talented and just like hustling team. And in terms of my thesis, I think the genesis was kind of when I realized senior fall, that I wanted to do something focused on gender inequality. And I also wanted to incorporate music into it because, of course, it's a passion of mine, but it was also something I was considering going into after graduation. And it became very clear to me quite quickly that I can't go into any sort of job in management, which is kind of in a gatekeeper position in our industry, without having these issues and considering them at the forefront of my mind when I'm doing my job. Because considering it as a vacuum is what's going to kind of perpetuate a lot of these problematic issues that are very much rampant in our industry. So I think after having a lot of meetings, my thesis advisor, Van Tran, shout out, totally amazing person, and kind of looking at the literature also, seeing what was out there and seeing what I wanted to read that I wasn't able to read, and really seeing how there's so much discussion in many other male-dominated industries about the double bind, about barriers to entry for women, especially women of color. But I wasn't really seeing that discussed in a kind of rigorous way for the music industry, especially not for the classical industry. So I kind of wanted to explore that a little bit more through my thesis. And I think what's central to what I found in my research is really like the whole ethos and mindset behind why classical music exists. And by that, I mean sort of this propensity for genius and who gets to be a genius, who does not get to be a genius, who gets to perform certain music. If whiteness and maleness have been this kind of basis of judgment for so long, then it's no surprise that if we're very comfortable in the status quo, that we don't see visibility of other different, particularly marginalized identities in our industry.
Wow. All of that is just so on point. And I feel like a lot of us don't ever really take a step back and see it that way. It's just is what it is. And we kind of just conform to what we're given, and because that's what we're told we're supposed to do, right? So really putting all that in perspective is so important. And I think it would be great for our audience to know what is a double bind, and then how does that relate to your research?
Yeah, so the double bind, I'm going to try to explain this in non-jargony academic terms. But to me, it's sort of when a person, an individual, an actor is presented with two equally undesirable choices because of their position in society. And oftentimes this position is something that is involuntary. Like, we can't help how we look, we can't help where we were born, et cetera, et cetera. And not only does this result in kind of structural barriers that people have to surmount, for example, if you are a woman leading a company which is mostly made of men, let's say you're in a tech company, you might want to pursue certain projects that you think are meaningful and that you think your team is suited for. But you might feel that because you might be perceived as too assertive and bitchy, that maybe I shouldn't present my idea. Or at the same time, if you were to kind of be more timid and kind of restrain yourself, then you would kind of not be taken seriously. So those are kind of two competing catch-22 options that kind of further put someone in a spotlight and also kind of create more emotional labor to overcome in those certain situations.
Right. So a double bind can apply to pretty much anyone in our field, whether it's about your race or your gender or, just how you see yourself. If you're not a white male, you're going to face a double bind at some point.
Right. And I think something that we should also highlight, which I touch on in my research as well, is that there is also this kind of artistic double bind that emerges, I think, particularly in the classical genre, which might be apart from gender entirely, which has to do with the fact that if you want a program to sell, or if you as an artist want to be able to support yourself and have a sustainable income, you might have to make some artistic compromises about what you can offer. Or as the artistic planning committee, you might have to make some choices about what you perceive will be marketable, what will sell. And that kind of results in this, well, we want to be diverse, we want to be inclusive, but at the same time, we also need to pay the bills and keep ourselves afloat. And that kind of results in this weird limbo where you, of course, know you have to keep programming the canonized Beethoven, Brahms, Bach, whatnot. But at the same time, you perceive anything that is beyond that, especially if it involves BIPOC bodies, as kind of a risk. Like it's a real financial risk for everyone involved.
Let's pause for a moment to explain Cindy's research a little further. Cindy's theory is women face a quadruple bind. The quadruple bind is made up of two double binds, the first relating to gender and the second to artistry. The gender double bind presents two options: play like or be perceived as a man, or look feminine or like a woman. The artistic double bind says you can either be modern by playing new music or in an unconventional style, or you can play in a traditional, conservative manner and play traditional repertoire. Through her research and interviews, Cindy found evidence of the quadruple bind operating in different occupational barriers.
The three occupational barriers include internalized sexism and misogyny, image, self-presentation, and the dress code, female body, reproduction, and motherhood.
Now, let's get back to the interview.
I'm just really wishing that I had, more months than I had, which was 4 months, to collect my data, because now I'm seeing more than ever that there's this huge intersectional gap where my participants are concerned. I really wish that I didn't control just for gender, that I also involved race and socioeconomic status and geography, because I feel like that would have informed even more the findings that I found. Yeah.